Good evening, Council, members of the public and staff. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councillors Garwood and Fisher, that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater on April 12th, 2023 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? And seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder to call this public meeting to order? Councillors Moore and Fisher, that the public meeting of the council held under section 17 and 34 of the Planning Act for applications ZB 2023-001 Johnson, ZB 2023-003, and OP 2023-002 Edmonstruct Developments, and ZB 2022-016 and OP 2022-002 Gallagher Materials and Lewis Pitt be called to order at 6:31 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Welcome to this public meeting of the Springwater Township Council held in compliance with section 17 and 34 of the Planning Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views in regard to the proposed amendments to the Township of Springwater zoning bylaw as amended and the Township of Springwater official plan as amended. The first part of this meeting is to present the amendments. Following, the public will have given an opportunity to make oral submissions through Zoom application or in person. Any person wishing to make an oral submission is to have notified the township prior to 8:30 a.m. this morning and to be added to the commenters list. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township of Springwater in respect to zoning bylaw amendment or an official plan amendment does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or a written submission to the Township of Springwater before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or official plan amendment is passed, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss all or part of the appeal. All comments and questions should be addressed through the chair. Oral submissions will be included in the meeting's minutes and form part of the public record, including the name, address of the speaker as information collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Privacy Act. The minutes of the meeting will be posted on the township's website. First, we have ZB 2022-001 by K&S Johnson for 154 Scarlet Line. I will now turn to the clerk to give dates of notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 23rd day of March 2023 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 9 properties in the Township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendments would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from Scarlet Line. The notice was also placed on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
There were no items of correspondence received for this application.
I will now call on Director Spagnell to give a presentation outlining the purpose and effect of this proposal.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin and members of council. The subject property is located on Scarlet Line as noted in the notice. It currently consists of 1.97 hectares or 4.38 acres of land. There's an existing house on the property, and the applicants are proposing to construct a large detached structure, which is to consist of garage space and an additional residential unit. The effect of the site-specific zoning amendment would allow for a building height for this building of 7.32 meters to the peak. It would allow for a total building size of 311.23 square meters or 3,350 square feet, and would devote essentially 158 square meters or 1,700 square feet towards an additional residential use. The property is currently zoned rural residential exception 2, which permits residential uses. And as far as setbacks go and coverage provisions with the building would be in compliance with all zone provisions prescribed for within comprehensive zoning bylaw 5000 and specifically the rural residential zone for this property. I'm available to answer any questions that council may have, and to my understanding, Mr. and Mrs. Johnston are also on the call if council has any questions for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Spagnell. I will now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions or make comments regarding this application.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There are no members of the public who have registered to make oral submission.
Thank you. Are there any members of the gallery that haven't registered but do wish to make an oral submission this evening? And seeing none, are there any members of council that have comment or question on this application? And seeing none. Thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and showing interest in the matter. We will now move on to OP 2023-002 and ZB 2023-003 by Evanstruck Developments for 25 Yonge Street North. I will call upon the clerk now to confirm notice of the meetings and the dates on which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 23rd day of March 2023 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 93 properties in the township of Springwater within 120 meters of the area to which the proposed amendments would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from Yonge Street North. The notice was also placed on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of the public meeting?
Correspondence was received from Bell Canada in an email dated February 15th, 2023, from Canada Post in a letter dated February 16th, 2023, from the Township of Springwater Finance Department in an email dated February 16th, 2023, from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in an email dated February 16, 2023, from the Township of Springwater Emergency Services Department in an email dated February 21, 2023, from Rama First Nation in an email dated February 22nd, 2023, from Simcoe County District School Board in an email dated March 1st, 2023, from Enbridge Gas in an email dated March 2nd, 2023, from Ainley Group in a letter dated March 8th, 2023, and from the County of Simcoe in an email dated March 14th, 2023. The correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I will now call upon Tyler Caldwell of Innovative Planning Solutions to give a presentation outlining the purpose and effect of this proposal.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Great. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. My name is Tyler Caldwell. I'm a planner with Innovative Planning Solutions, representing our clients and their applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment at 25 Yonge Street North in Elmville. I have a brief presentation following which I can take any questions you might have. The subject lands are outlined in red on the image shown here. They are currently vacant, possessing 19 meters of frontage on 25 Yonge Street North, and they possess a lot area of 1,200 square meters. The surrounding uses include a 3-story apartment building to the south, a 3-story apartment building to the east, Yonge Street to the west, and single detached residential dwellings to the north. For background context, the applicants pre-consulted with the township and the county, followed by a preliminary development application and deputation to township council in October of 2021 relative to the proposed development. And at the time, the previous council's feedback on the proposal was generally positive. The community of Elmville features a diverse mix of housing from single detached to multi-unit dwellings, area parks, schools, and a community arena. Everyday commercial amenities are also within walking distance, primarily along Yonge Street and Queen Street. The community is serviced by transit, with Simcoe's Link system providing north and southbound stops within Elmville and connections, basically connecting residents to destinations throughout Simcoe County. The property, and this time outlined in blue, is within the built boundary and is designated settlement in the county's official plan. And the property is designated general commercial in the township's official plan. So for clarity, the kind of red brick type pattern on this map indicates the area that has the general commercial designation currently in the local official plan, and the property of interest today is outlined in blue specifically. With the subject property outlined again, this time in red, it is currently zoned general commercial or CG. We note the diversity in uses and zones in the area with a variety of commercial uses. However, all neighboring parcels to 25 Yonge are zoned and used for residential purposes, most notably the R3 zoning on lands to the south and west, which are occupied by 2 different multi-unit development parcels. The stars on this slide indicate R3 zone multi-unit residential properties in the area as they exist. In December of 2022, formal applications were submitted in support of the development concept shown here. The concept includes a 3-story 9-unit walk-up apartment building with the residential units limited to the 2nd and 3rd floors. 8 units are proposed as 2-bedroom and 1 unit is proposed as 3-bedroom. The units would possess square footages of approximately 700 square feet to 1,300 square feet, and they would be purpose-built rentals. A total of 12 parking spaces are provided on site, including 1 barrier-free parking space. And parking is located in the rear yard, screened from view behind the building, as well as on the ground floor under the building. The lobby is located at the front, of course, fronting Yonge Street, with a direct pedestrian access to Yonge Street. A second walkway runs parallel to the parking aisle, providing pedestrian access to 116 square meter amenity area in the rear yard. And for reference, the amenity area you can see in that kind of grid pattern in the darker shade of green to the northeast portion of the site. And you can see the south of that, in between the drive aisle, is the gray pedestrian walkway that would extend under the building at grade. And again, connecting to Yonge Street. 2 staircases and an elevator provide access to the 2 living floors, with a 3rd floor including an outdoor terrace approximately 40 square meters in size. The building and parking area have been designed to maximize distance from the single detached home, which abuts the property on the north side, by maintaining a setback of at least 3 meters or 9.8 feet. So as you can see that on the drawing here, the building, as I said, has been positioned closer to the south property line. And keep in mind, the south property line is the side adjacent to existing multi-unit apartment uses, and maximizing, based on the available width of the property, the setback we can achieve to the residents to the north. In support of the proposed development, applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment are required. The official plan amendment would redesignate the property from general commercial to urban residential. The zoning bylaw amendment would rezone the property from general commercial or CG to the residential 3 or R3 exemption zone. 6 special provisions seek site-specific R3 zoning relief. They do include a reduced lot area, reduced lot frontage, reduced front and side yard setbacks, and increased lot coverage, as well as a reduced parking ratio. From a planning policy standpoint, the proposal directs growth to the built boundary of an urban settlement area, contributing to the county and township's minimum intensification targets of 32% and 15% respectively. The proposed development diversifies the available housing supply, providing 9 new purpose-built rental units suitable for a range of household sizes. New residents will contribute to the local economy, as they would reside in proximity to everyday commercial amenities and existing local businesses. The development also presents an efficient use of vacant urban land, existing municipal services and infrastructure, and in a cost-effective and compact manner. So in summary, the applicant does propose a 3-story 9-unit rental walk-up apartment building at 25 Yonge Street North, and applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment are required to facilitate the development. The proposed development is compatible with surrounding land uses and will contribute to the range of rental housing options at an appropriate scale within the built boundary of Elmville. And this, of course, is where everyday services and amenities are readily available. For these reasons, the proposal conforms to and is consistent with all levels of planning policy, and therefore we believe represents good planning. So this does conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call upon moderator to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions and make comments regarding this application.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There are no members of the public who have registered to make oral submission.
Thank you. Are there any members of the gallery this evening who wish to make comment or question? And seeing no members of the public. Council, is there any questions or comments regarding this application? Councillors Fisher and then Cabral.
I would just like to say that I think in an age where we talk about affordable housing, this is actual affordable housing. And I think purpose-built apartment rentals within that square footage inside of the boundaries is making good use of land. And to this gentleman's point, they do support the local economy and they do so by living within the community. I think it's a really smart project and I support it.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I actually have one question with respect to the report itself, and I do thank Mr. Kowal for the presentation. The area I'd like to get some clarity on is the traffic impact study. I just want to know, Mr. Kowal, if you might be able to provide some insight as to when the traffic impact study was conducted. And the reason I bring that up is about this time last year, there was a newly installed, and I notice on your slide it's included there, but there was a newly installed PXO crossover signalized put in at George and Young, just down, like literally meters away from where the new apartment is proposed to be located. So I'm just wondering whether that traffic impact study took place before or afterwards, and whether or not that particular pedestrian crossing has been taken or was taken into account when it was completed.
Thank you. Mr. Kowal.
Thank you. Through the mayor, thanks for the question. I'd have to circle back with our traffic consultant on that. I do know the report we received from them is dated November 10th, 2022. So I think a few months prior to November of 2022 is when I believe they did their traffic counts and their assessment and their actual work involved in preparing that report from November of last year. But as specifically to the pedestrian crossing, I'll have to circle back with them to confirm if that was factored in or not, or if that was constructed or not at the time of their study.
Thank you. Council, are there any other comments or questions? And seeing none, thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and for showing an interest in this matter. We will now move on to ZB 2022-06 by Gallagher Materials for 2857 George Johnson Road. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and on the dates to which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 23rd day of March, 2023 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 91 properties in the township of Springwater within 800 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from George Johnson Road. The notice was also placed on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
Correspondence was received from Rama First Nation in an email dated January 17th, 2023, from Enbridge Gas in an email dated January 31st, 2023, from Rogers in a letter dated January 31st, 2023, from the County of Simcoe in a letter dated February 10th, 2023, from Canadian Pacific Rail in an email dated February 13th, 2023, from resident S. Bonji of 8 Lloyd Cook Drive in an email dated March 29, 2023, resident R. Rumble of 20 Boothby Crescent in an email dated April 3rd, 2023, resident G. and J. Hunter of 25 Boothby Crescent in an email dated April 3rd, 2023, residents B&B Hebbies of 2931 George Johnson Road in an email dated April 4, 2023, residents S. Gariepi of 29 Boothby Crescent in 5 emails dated April 6, 7, and 10, 2023. Resident G Gagno of 16 Boothby Crescent in an email dated April 10, 2023. Resident M Hurst of 21 Boothby Crescent in an email dated April 10, 2023. Resident E Allen of 28 Boothby Crescent in an email or in a letter dated April 11th, 2023. And residents S and J Rossel of 12 Boothby Crescent in a letter dated April 11, 2023. And all of the correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I will now call on Melanie Horton to give a presentation outlining the purpose and effect of this proposal.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and good evening, members of council and staff and members of the public. I'm just going to share my screen if I can here. Just give me a moment. Hopefully that's visible to everybody in the audience.
It is now, yes.
Great, thank you. So my name is Melanie Horton. I'm a registered professional planner with Escher Planning, and I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of Gallagher Materials applications for an expansion of their Lewis pit. Joining me this evening and available to answer questions if needed are Mr. David Kennedy from Gallagher Materials, together with Jay Flanagan from MTE Consulting and Mr. Kyle Fleming from Roots Environmental. Just see if I can get this next slide here. I'll just give an overview of the proposal. The existing Lewis pit is located at 2791 George Johnston Road. It's been active for about 50 years and is licensed under the Aggregate Resources Act. The pit is currently permitted to ship a maximum of 750,000 tons per year. And the aggregate site has been used over the years for local residential development, number projects, 400 series highway projects, as well as municipal infrastructure projects. The application is proposing an expansion to the pit on adjacent lands owned by Gallagher Materials, which would add 17.5 hectares to the extraction area. And you can see outlined in yellow on the image is the entire property. The existing pit you can see on the photo is the north portion. The township pit is just adjacent to the north, and then the expansion lands are bounded by Seaton Road and George Johnson Road. There are no changes proposed to the annual tonnage or to the entrance or exit, which is currently on George Johnson Road, and the traffic and haul routes would remain the same. The operations and phasing, this is part of the site plan, which is included in the Aggregate Resources Act license application. And it outlines the phasing would be 4 phases, 4 areas. So from the adjoining pitlands to the north and proceeding southerly towards Seaton Road. Berms would be constructed around the limits of the site for noise control. And as I mentioned, access would be maintained through the existing entrance onto George Johnston Road. The site would be progressively rehabilitated as outlined on the site plans. And the next slide just shows graphically what the rehabilitation would look like. The darker green areas are areas of reforestation. And then the lighter yellowish green is field meadow and lower density reforestation. The site currently is in a forested state, so the objective is to return it to an environment similar to what exists today. There's a wildlife corridor of existing vegetation that's to be maintained during the first 3 phases of the operation, after which rehabilitation would occur in those phases and maintain that corridor during the 4th phase. After the side slopes are created and the required berms are removed from setbacks adjacent to Seaton Road, those areas would be stabilized with a suitable ground cover. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, a bit of a busy slide, but it graphically shows the 2 application processes. So there's 2 related parallel applications, one under the Aggregate Resources Act, which is administered by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And the second, and the purpose of the meeting this evening, is under the Planning Act. So official plan and zoning amendments are required for this application. The studies that have been consulted or prepared for both applications include water resources or hydrogeology report, a natural environment report, a noise study, an archaeology study, and a traffic study for the Municipal Planning Act process. You can see in green where we are currently. So the applications for both the Aggregate Resources Act and the Planning Act have been submitted. Under the Aggregate Resources Act, the notification requirements include a notice in the paper, signage on the site, and circulation to landowners within 120 meters. Because the township zoning bylaw requires notification for an aggregate site to residents within 800 meters, we followed that same protocol and sent registered notice to those residents. There's also a requirement for an information session under the Aggregate Resources Act. That was held virtually, but something a little bit different in this case. The applicant opted to have a drop-in center, which was available to members of the public to come by and take a look at the site plans and the reports and ask questions of staff. That was open the first couple of weeks of November and is still open for anyone who wants to drop in and ask questions. Just want to make a mention that in my experience, having been in this field for about 30 years, that's quite unusual and I think exceptional that an applicant would go to that effort to make sure that they're making themselves available to inform people about the project. Their notification under the Aggregate Resources Act is a 60-day process, and during that time, there were 13 letters of objection received, as well as letters from Ministry of Natural Resources and the Ministry of Environment Species at Risk branch. Consultation and notification was also sent to 8 First Nations communities, which may have an interest in the project. So far, we've heard back from and met with the Métis of Ontario, and we're just waiting to hear from anyone else who may have an interest. And on the bottom portion, as you can see, we're at the statutory meeting stage. So we're still really in the early stages of this project. And the efforts right now are really focused on working with agencies and the community to resolve questions and concerns that have come up. I just want to speak a little bit about what we've heard so far in the process. And most of this is through the Aggregate Resources Act process. But we've also been copied on the comments that have come into the municipality. So we're aware of some of the issues that have been raised. So they're mentioned here on the slide, and I'll go through those individually. So firstly, concerns with traffic, potential increases in traffic. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but the entrance will stay the same. This is really an expansion to the existing operation. So the intent is that this additional area would allow the pit to continue operating at its current levels. So there's no proposed increase in tonnage and no proposed increase in traffic. There has been a traffic impact study completed. It's part of the Planning Act application. And it concludes that the expansion would allow the operations to continue to service, or the roads would continue to service at the same level they're at now. Concerns with impact to water is something else that commonly comes up with gravel pit applications. This is a pit that would remain above the water table. So the maximum is 1.5 meters above the high water table. You can see on the image there, the number of little blue dots, those are wells on the site, and those are for monitoring. So there's some on the existing Lewis pit, and then there's some on the expansion lands. So those are to monitor water levels through the life of the operation. The hydrogeology study that was completed concluded that there would be no impact on water quality or quantity expected as a result of the proposed above water extraction. I know there was some concern with water taking. There is a permit to take water for the existing pit. That's for washing. And the majority of that water is recirculated through a closed loop system. So it's not taken as though it was a water bottling operation, for example. It's not trucked off site, it's recirculated on the site. Just have to excuse my voice here. I'm just getting over a cold, so hopefully it doesn't die out before the end of the presentation. But noise and dust, I think this is far and away the largest concern we've heard from the neighbors immediately adjacent to the east in the subdivision just off Seaton Road. So at the drop-in center, there were several residents that expressed concerns about dust on their properties. Gallagher's taking these concerns very seriously. They've hired an air quality engineer to investigate the cause of this issue and to determine what additional measures can be implemented to control dust. One of the things that they've excuse me, requested of the residents is access to properties so that they can collect samples of the dust on people's properties. At this point, I don't think anyone stepped forward to volunteer to do that, but hopefully, as we continue to work with the community, we'll be able to get some of those samples. There'll be dust collection and monitoring over the next few months, again, in an effort to make sure there's a good understanding of the issue and how it can be resolved. The conditions on the site plan and the box in the slide on the right, those are the mandatory conditions under the Aggregate Resources Act. And I'll just highlight the one that says the licensee shall mitigate the amount of dust on the site and minimize any offsite impacts. That's enforceable by the Ministry of Natural Resources and by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. So that's an obligation that the licensee has to maintain. So again, we'll be looking at the concerns that have been raised and the best measures to minimize those impacts. In terms of noise, that's another concern that's come up. The main processing area is going to be maintained in the existing pit, and the noise controls based on the noise study, which essentially include the berms around the site, those have been designed to control noise from the operation. Archaeology, I saw a couple of concerns with or questions about the archaeology studies. The site was studied in a stage 1, 2, and 3 archaeology investigation, completed according to the Ministry of Culture protocols. There were 2 sites located during the course of the stage 2 assessment. There are those red dots kind of in the central area of the property. Both sites represent Aboriginal campsites dating to the late Iroquois period. And I should note that representatives from Chippewa-Zarama First Nation were at the site as part of that study. There's stage 4 work that was required. That's basically clearing and cataloging of the artifacts. That's just recently been completed in the last few weeks, and that report is being finalized for submission to the province for review. Natural environment study, I mentioned Kyle Fleming's on the call if questions arise here. The property expansion area you can see outlined in red. And as you'll see, there's a very large woodland system that this property is part of. I think the entire system is over 300 hectares in size. The field work that Kyle's team completed included multi-season surveys for amphibians, breeding birds, wildlife is wilding, and vegetation inventory. And in addition to the setbacks that have been incorporated into the design and the restrictions for vegetation removal to avoid breeding season for birds and bats, Kyle was very involved in the design of the rehabilitation program for this site, specifically in terms of the types of tree species that would be planted, how they'd be planted, and the protocols for rehabilitation. So you'll see on the site plans, his notes reflect the recommendations of the ecology team. So you're wondering why this site? It does contain a high quality sand and gravel resource. It's recognized as a provincially significant resource and protected in provincial, regional, and local planning policy. Expansions of existing operations are encouraged as they can take advantage of existing infrastructure, such as the processing area and haul routes. It's a close to market supply of high quality aggregate. Just a note there, on average in Ontario, there's 164 million tons that are used each year. So it's about 12 tons per person. I'll talk a little bit about the township in a moment. But Ontario is experiencing a shortage of high quality resources close to market, and that drives up the cost of infrastructure. I just wanted to briefly give an overview of aggregates in spring waters. I know some people have had questions about that. So the red areas on this map show the existing licensed aggregate sites. There are currently 27 licenses in spring water. 3 of those are owned by the township. There's 2 that are Class B, so those are small, less than 20,000 tons per year, and 25 that are Class A. They're all sand and gravel, so there's no quarries here. And the entire licensed area, if you added them all up, is 728 hectares. So that represents 1.4% of the total land area of the township. You can see the sort of beige areas. Those are the resource areas that have been mapped by the province. So the aggregate resource inventory papers of the Ontario Geological Survey. These are glacial features where there's very high quality sand and gravel, and that's where these operations are concentrated. And finally, just production in Springwater, just of interest. It has averaged for the past 15 years between 1 million and 1.3 million tons. In terms of percentage of the county, that's between 8 and 10%, fairly consistently again over the last 15 to 20 years. Simcoe County's in the 12 million tons per year, although last year a couple of years ago was exceptionally high at 16 million tons. And Simcoe's total is about 8 to 10% of the provincial total, which in 2021 was 167 million tons. So that's just to give a little bit of perspective on township production. It's fairly steady, as you can see. It does respond to demand with tips and peaks over the years, but that around that 1 million to 1.3 million has been pretty steady over the last decade. I did want to mention the studies for this application have been posted on a project website. It's calibermaterialsinc.ca. So those are available for anyone to download and view if you'd like. And again, the drop-in center is still available if people want to call and make an appointment to come in. We're happy to talk to anybody about the operation. So that concludes the presentation, and happy to answer questions, as I mentioned. And my voice held out.
Thank you, Ms. Horton. I will now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people who have registered online to ask questions or make comments regarding this application.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There is one member of the public who is registered to make oral submission for this application. Oscar from 36 Riley's Run. You may now address council with your questions or concerns.
No questions at this point.
That's all I have for the oral submission part. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call upon the clerk to provide the number of people who have registered in person to ask questions or make comment.
Thank you. There are 3 members of the public who have registered to make oral submissions in person. When I call your name, if you could please join council at the front desk and ensure you speak directly into the microphone. First, we have Rod Rumble of 20 Boothby Crescent.
I assume I'm turned on.
You're welcome to take a seat. It's easier for the mics there.
Here we go. Wow. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Cabral, council, and staff. Maybe the most important, friends and neighbors. My name is Rod Rumble. I live at 20 Boothby Crescent, and I realized as I sat here, I'm the old guy here. I'm the resident senior citizen. Even though I'm retired, I had a pretty lengthy career in finance and general management. In fact, when I was quite young, many, many years ago, my colleague and sort of a mentor was became a friend. He had an alphabet after his name. Bachelor of Applied Science, Master of Business Administration, CA, and PEng. He was an industrial engineer that decided he wanted to be an accountant, and then he decided he wanted to be a consultant. And he worked for a company called Arthur Andersen before Enron. In any case, Bob, many times we shared lunch, pizza, and many times he would say, Rod, in all the time I spent at school, And all the time I spent as an auditor with Anderson and when I was a consultant with Anderson, two main principles stand out. And I think you should know what they are. So he did. He told me, when you hire auditors or you hire consultants, always make sure that they know who signs the check. And also, the other major business principle is BS baffles brains. That's what he taught me. I haven't forgotten those. Tonight, I will not be writing any checks, and I hope I don't baffle any brains. In any case, various laws in this country relate to property owners and the quiet enjoyment of property. Indeed, nuisance is seen to impinge on that quiet enjoyment. In fact, the Supreme Court of Canada, in a decision of St. Lawrence Cement versus Barrett, would seem to suggest, and I quote, nuisance may take a variety of forms and may include not only actual physical damage to land, but also interference with the health, comfort, or convenience of the owner or occupier. That's directly from the Supreme Court of Canada. Surely, clouds of sand has been clearly demonstrated to exist on our street and in our neighborhood, and increase the proximity, bring it even closer and larger. That is going to definitely have an impact of nuisance. And then add to it the smell of an asphalt plant that I noticed is totally missing from the applicant's presentation. Along with the obvious negative impacts of this expansion on our immediate residential area, the Springwater official plan needs to be considered, and that's why we're here. This plan has been approved by both the County of Simcoe and at the same time, the Ontario Municipal Board in those days. It was approved by the OMB Order 0131, January 27th, 2003, long before Galibier Materials was registered as a corporation in 2012. Now, referring to the OP operating plan, official plan, section 810(2-4. The objective is to preserve the Minisink Swamp and maintain the quality and quantity of water of Willow and Black Creeks. While the applicant's hydrology reports address some of those questions as to the impact of the aggregate removal and the inherent washing may have on groundwater table, there is little, if any, reference to the impact on the greater watershed referred to by the official plan. The applicant has a permit to take water, I can give you the number, that allows for the removal of 2,937,600 liters of water. I'd love to see the water meter. The average Olympic swimming pool holds 2.5 million liters of water. Simply put, the applicant is drawing over an Olympic-sized pool every day. Fewer than 35 such pools have ever been used in competition in the Olympic Games. The applicant could fill all of those pools 10 times over every year. That's a lot of good, clean, pure, fresh water. Section 810(2-8). Objective is to preserve the distinctive natural attributes of the Snow Valley settlement area, its valley lands, environmentally significant areas, and ensure the maintenance, protection, enhancement, and/or restoration of natural heritage features and their ecological functions within that area. The expansion area, in addition to the existing pit, is 21.1 hectares. I'm an old guy. I have no idea what the heck a hectare is. I think in terms of acres, and in my case, I'm a big football fan. So I think in terms of football fields. Well, in this particular case, that represents the home fields of all 32 NFL teams. Besides that, there's even room left over to throw in a few CFL teams. Given the scale of that huge hole in the ground, it can't conceivably preserve the distinctive nature attributes of the Snow Valley settlement area. Section 810, 212. The plan calls that we shall ensure that land use planning promotes water conservation and supports the efficient use of water resources on a watershed and sub-watershed basis. Water quality and quantity will be maintained and enhanced where possible through well-planned, sustainable, and environmentally responsible development and the environmental monitoring program. I dare say this section needs very little comment. It's self-evident that the lands in question are of equal or more, or better than equal merit compared to other watershed areas. To be protected from contamination due to washing and irresponsible permission to take massive amounts of water. Little is known scientifically of the long-term impact of washing aggregate. Well-documented studies of groundwater processes are available in the area a few kilometers north in Tiny Township. The studies conducted over several decades indicate that many layers and types of soil, aggregate, and rock contribute to the extremely high quality of water that exists in the area. The effect of leaching contaminants into the groundwater after stripping the protective and filtering effects of soils above the water table can be devastating. Obviously, common sense dictates that if there are many levels of soil and rock through which rainwater and snowmelt filters in order to reach the water table, if there are hundreds of meters of that, it's got to purify the water a lot better than, I think it was 1.5 meters, which is going to be allowed. Our residential health, comfort, and convenience are going to be impacted in a hugely negative way. We can't collectively argue that the applicant does not have the inherent right to pursue his business interests as they currently exist. The town of Springwater granted permission for the developer of Snow Valley to subdivide his property to accommodate our street. I believe it was originally intended to be either a church or a school. That permission was granted in the full knowledge that the existing Lewis pit was in situ. Council knew it was there. We as homeowners, home buyers, should have been aware of the existing pit, even though Fred Lewis had left it dormant. And we should have known the proximity to our properties. However, that does not mean that we, nor the town of Springwater, the county of Simcoe, or the province of Ontario can absolve in good conscience their assurances to protect our rights to enjoy quiet enjoyment of our property. One of the area's most important features within only meters of this proposed pit is the 9-mile portage, recognized by both Parks Canada and the Ontario Heritage Trust as historically and culturally significant. The pit, and particularly the berm, will have a huge negative impact on that trail. One of the key objects of the Ontario Heritage Trust is to, quote, preserve, maintain, reconstruct, restore, and manage property of historical, architectural, archaeological, recreational, aesthetic, natural, and scenic interest, unquote. This significant forested area is home to many species of birds, some on the International Union for Conservation of Nature red list as endangered species. There are many deer, foxes, turkeys, coyotes, etc., along with a variety of trilliums, our provincial flower, and other wildflowers. A huge gaping hole surrounded by a treeless 10-meter-high berm is hardly conducive to contributing to the Heritage Trust objective. Aside from the trail's national historic significance, it's also recognized as a valuable recreational trail that passes through some of the most beautiful natural scenery in this great province of Ontario. The last point I want to make is more personal and mercenary. The applicant wishes to expand operations to realize increased profit and enhance his investment. Why else are you in business? No doubt, the expansion of the pit will result in tens of millions of dollars in greater wealth for the owner. While he sees a huge increase, we, the adjacent property owners, will realize huge declines in our property values. Aside from having to contend with all the noise, with all the traffic, all the noxious air, the water effluent, we will in effect be paying for the impingement of our own property. Certainly, the combination of these factors is irrefutable evidence of what the Supreme Court of Canada calls, quote, interference with health, comfort, or convenience of the owner. Thank you for your sympathetic consideration for the Snow Valley settlement area, myself, and my neighbors.
Thank you. Oh, now. Clerk Ainsworth, are there any other members registered for in-person?
Thank you. Sylvia Mays of 51 Vancouver Street.
Welcome, Ms. Mays.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. As mentioned, my name is Sylvia Mays. I am one of 4 trustees for the property at 2361 Seaton Road, Concession 9, Part Lot 16, formerly Township of Ephrata. That's the property directly across the road, a 7-acre wooded lot. I'm also expressing the views of my 3 siblings, Stanley Mays, Shane Mays, and Sandra Mays. Our father purchased the 7-acre site over 50 years ago. We enjoy the serenity of the property, walking through the treed lot and enjoying the beauty it has to offer, as well as recollecting the fond memories and stories of our dad, who was born and raised on the 9th line of Vesper Valley Road in Minising. Ewart May's original intent was to, upon retiring, build a house on the property, or for some of his 4 children to consider living on this rural property. Unfortunately, his dreams were never realized. Our mother passed away. He subsequently moved into a retirement home, and in 2019, he too passed away. We have yet to build a home for one of us to live in our retirement. We made inquiries about subdividing the 7-acre lot into 2 parcels so that 2 of the siblings that were interested in retiring to the country could build houses. But we were advised by the township of the agricultural zoning restrictions and told that there was little chance of our rezoning going through. Apparently, only large companies with big money behind them can get agricultural lands rezoned for purposes much more intrusive to the community than a couple of modest homes. Ms. Horton's presentation attempted to address some of our concerns this evening. However, we all know that once rezoning is granted, variances arise, and far too often they are granted. We are also concerned with the following issues that arise from turning agricultural land into a gravel pit. Increased truck travel on George Johnson Road, making turns off of Seaton even more dangerous. And we don't need more traffic lights in a rural setting. Excessive dust from trucks and the pit itself. Excessive noise from equipment and trucks, operating noise, loud beeping, trucks backing up, etc. Well water being used to wash gravel, increasing the chance of existing and future residential wells having to be dug deeper or experiencing water shortages. Infringement on our rural way of life and passive enjoyment of the nature-friendly community. Future property values will also suffer with homeowners' homes not being as desirable with the neighboring issues. Berms will only minimally improve some of the issues. They primarily help block the views of passersby from having to see a construction site, out of sight, out of mind. A man-made hill isn't as nice as the countryside. What guarantees do we have that the company or the company whom they sell the property to won't take the berms out in the future, digging in plain sight and closer to the road? If a municipal council supports rezoning agricultural lands today, I am sure that a future council would see an action such as removing a small berm as a minor variance, if the company was even called out for doing so. I implore you to not rezone the subject lands. That land is the buffer for an existing gravel pit. Don't let a large company take out the buffer that was put in place for a purpose. And I'm also attaching some of the family history in the township of Vespra. Thank you very much.
Clerk Ainsworth, we have one more registered guest to bring forward.
Esther Allen of 28 Boothby Crescent.
Okay that she brings photos up to you? Thank you.
I may not speak as technical this evening, maybe more from the heart. So the photos in the front of that yellow folder are just from this past weekend because it was Easter and this is typically when it all starts. So I just thought I would bring them in to share some current. I know Councillor Thompson has shared many of our past photos, but these are just literally from the last couple of days. So good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, and fellow Springwater and Gallagher staff in attendance. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am, like you said, a resident of Boothby Crescent in Minising, which is an adjacent property to where this proposed zoning change for the Lewis Pit expansion is being presented tonight. I have lived in Springwater for the past 6 years. Of this 6-year timeframe, my family has had numerous documented concerns for over 3 of those years with the current Lewis Pit operations. Although some of our concerns are more general in nature, which have been discussed, like the persistent noise of beeping trucks, the all-day humming of equipment, as well as trucks barreling down my road with a blatant disregard for the residents, the children standing at the bus stop, people biking, walking their dogs, etc. Our biggest concern is obviously the negative air quality that we experience for over 3 years. The constant layer of sand and dust that literally coats my home inside and out. From April, typically starts Easter weekend, which you can see from those most recent photos, it did again, until late October, November annually. So basically 7 of the 12 months of the year, we experience this daily. In your own words, Mayor Coughlin, I really feel the people who live in Springwater identify with the space, the openness, the forest, and the trees. That's what makes Springwater different, and you know you're not in Barrie anymore. Springwater is more than just a township, it's a way of life. Our trails, our wetlands, forest, and farms provide a landscape that is incomparable. However, it's the people that make Springwater so extraordinary. I personally couldn't agree more with your statements. My family and I moved here for many of the reasons you mentioned, and not in our wildest dreams did we ever expect to be proposed with an active gravel pit operation within 30 meters of our home, our yard, and where we and our children play and relax. It is unfathomable to me that this license application and zoning change request can even be considered in what is now such a developed residential area on Seaton Road. I have, as mentioned, over the past 3+ years, completely lost the ability to use our home's outdoor space. We no longer have outdoor furniture, barbecue, family gatherings, trampolines, toys, anything of that nature in our yard. Some days I don't even let my kids outside because I don't know what literally is raining down on them. I know these may sound insignificant, but I implore you all to think of your current lifestyles and the amount of time you all spend enjoying your beautiful yards and outdoor spaces with your children, your grandchildren, your friends, and your family. We have gotten to the point where my family time at home is spent blowing dust and sand off our roofs, siding, windows, and walls, basically anything we leave outside. You've seen the past photos of just this past Easter weekend of my husband's truck that was left in our driveway for less than 8 hours. The nature of the sand is so fine, it penetrates even into our home and covers essentially every flat surface, our floors, kitchen counters, tables, beds, and pillows. We've had to invest in additional filtration for our home. We lined our vents with filters. We constantly vacuum our air makeup units and our furnace filters, only to literally do it again days later. The current Lewis Pit operation is over 130 meters from where my property exists, and this expansion would move it 30 meters away. What are we to reasonably expect when we already have so many concerns? And moreover, what is a reasonable expectation of this neighbor to our home? I ponder if one of my residential neighbors behind me was causing this concern to our home with something on their property, what would be the expectation for them to stop and who would be enforcing it? So I would like to pose these questions to be answered for my family. How will the owner and operator ensure that the persistent damage to our home stops now with the remaining life of the current pit? And how will they prevent it from happening when the operation is 4 times closer to my house? Which gravel, aggregate pits, or quarries that operate in Springwater are this proposed proximity to any existing residents? Upon my family's brief review, we can find none in the immediate area that exists this close to where people live or contradict the township's extractive industrial ME zone 28.3.6 that states extractions cannot proceed closer than 120 meters to a resident. How is the NVCA involved in this approval process? As you can see in one of those pictures, I find the irony in having an environmentally protected land sign literally 15 meters from my home and being told when we purchased our home only dead trees could be removed, and now having a danger open pit sign less than 3 meters from that environmentally protected sign. So am I to assume this land is no longer environmentally protected? And who was responsible for making that decision? This zoning change was not in the Springwater official plan in 2017 when I purchased my home, nor is it in the most recent update. So whose plan is this? My neighbor briefly spoke to it, and I agree. I know who benefits financially from this expansion. And of course, a need will be identified, but is there a true need? And lastly, in a time where many of us are struggling with our basic essentials like gas and groceries, how can we expect it to continue to spend our time and money on cleaning, filters, roof washing, cars, driveways, all in order to take care of the things that my family owns and we have worked so hard for? And to expand on this, as was mentioned in the presentation 6th slide and the 6th bullet, but not addressed with an answer from the applicant, who will be responsible for the significant loss in my property value when a gravel pit is operating 30 meters from my house? My family's largest investment is this home. This home is my husband and mine's retirement plan. It's potentially the education plan for my children and certainly their inheritance. So as our property is devalued because of this operation and we are unable to sell or must sell at a great loss, who's responsible? Who compensates us for that? I appreciate your time this evening, and I have provided a copy of this letter to the clerk in order to obtain the answers to these questions from either the applicant or council. I do, however, in closing, respectfully ask that this be considered my family's official objection to the Lewis Pit expansion as a Springwater resident and a neighboring property to the current pit. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the gallery who have not registered that would like to make an oral submission this evening? Yes, please come forward. I'm going to have to ask you to state your name and address for the public record.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Davis. I live at the residence 34 Riley's Run. And that's very, very close by. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councilors, and staff. My husband and I have 3 children, Ella, Paige, and Burke. We also have a new little puppy named Rocky. We have thoroughly enjoyed our time living here in Springwater. It has been a quiet and healthy place to bring up our children. We enjoy outdoor sports all year round. My family and I are strongly against the approval of this application for the expansion of this gravel pit. We have the right to breathe clean and healthy air. There is already so much dust in the air from this site, and the expansion of it will greatly increase this, as it will be much closer to our residential area. Of more concern is a possibility of carcinogenic silica that this site could emit. People in the area have paid a great deal of money. We have worked very, very hard to afford our homes. This is a very nice neighborhood in a great township. This will negatively impact the value of all of our properties. I just wanted to touch on the noise berms. We get noise from the train when the wind blows from the northwest. I find it very difficult to believe that berms will alleviate the noise issue completely. I beg you to please stop the expansion of this gravel site and allow the residents of the Snow Valley area to continue to enjoy their properties in a clean and healthy way. Please vote no. Vote for our health. Thank you.
Please come forward. And I would have to ask for your name and address as well.
I'm Tyler Henderson, 39 Riley's Run.
And now I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it into the microphone for the public record. My apologies.
I might be a little more casual than everybody else. Tyler Henderson, 39 Riley's Run. As the previous speakers have highlighted, I strongly disagree with this proposal. I'm not sure if I can share some photos with this camera at all. But if you spend any time in and around the gravel pit, you can see the dust and the snow on a regular basis, on a regular day. I have a 7 and 9-year-old daughter, fantastic children. I firmly believe in good air quality. It's obvious that the dust is an issue. It's possibly carcinogenic. I am concerned for my family. And growing up in Mississauga, watching the residents, I grew up on Winston Churchill and 403, if you guys are familiar. Over the last 20 years, watching that move west per concession. And when I look at Snow Valley Ski Hill, Vesper Golf Club, we've got Berry Hill Farms and our residents. To me, it looks like a residential expansion zone, not a commercial expansion zone. So it's going to affect a lot of lives, this decision. And I drive my kids to school quite frequently. There's a lot of buses. I noticed in the initial presentation, they had some pictures of the road there on George Johnson covered in mud. On bad days, your car is completely covered in mud. Not to mention the grade of the hill. It's downhill. It's dangerous. There's many buses up and down that hill every day. And the trucks are aggressive and they're in our way and they're dangerous. So speaking from the heart, those are my main concerns. The wetlands are right there. We've mentioned the native issues as well. And that's all I have off the top of my head, but it's going to really upset a lot of people and potentially cause health impacts on individuals. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. we have any other members of the gallery who wish to speak? Come on forward. I just ask for your name and address, please.
My name is Kaylee Duncan and I live at 18 Lloyd Cook Drive West. And thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to be here tonight and to hear all of us. We really appreciate it. I have been sitting here listening to all the stories and all of the reasoning behind a strong feeling of a no vote that we request of all of you. And I just wanted to put on record that on behalf of our residents, we absolutely oppose the expansion of the pit. And I would encourage all of our residents to do the same.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the gallery who wish to speak, make comment, or ask questions? And seeing none, I was going to move to members of yes. Do any members of council have any comment on the application? I'll move to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I've been asked by a couple of residents to also ask some questions on their behalf. Some folks don't feel as comfortable to get up in front of council and speak, so that's quite all right. The first comes from Susan Garapi. And I know there is some correspondence already on file from Susan, but there's a couple of other questions that she'd like to ask. She's asking that Gallagher's application recognizes our concern about property values, but doesn't provide a solution. She's saying that you can go to a website called gravel.org, where the research has been done. It shows that property values will go down approximately 30%, and that's across the board. As well as our enjoyment of our homes. If the rezoning goes through, how will homeowners be compensated? And doing a bit of research, I can confirm that compensation has been done in the past. So I think that is something that you could certainly fight for. The township has a pit right next to Gallagher's pit. Has the township considered a land swap of some sort? This would seem a better solution than allowing a rezoning right across from future residential, which is Berry Hill Farms, and right next to existing residential. Yeah, okay. And then next was from Sue Rossell. I can get the addresses for you too. First question was phases 1 through 4 are slated to happen in order, but what if Gallagher finds a good vein, as they have stated as their one caveat? Will this mean that they can jump to phase 3 or 4 immediately, or change the timing and location of digging at their discretion once approval is given? What's the worst case scenario in terms of how soon they will be mining in phase 4? Number 2, Gallagher is permitted to draw 2.937 million liters per day from a designated well. How much is currently being drawn daily and for what purpose? How is this wastewater currently being disposed of, given that there is currently no closed loop system in place? Number 3, going forward, when Gallagher says the majority of water drawn will be managed through a closed loop system, what percentage is this? Between 51 to 100. What happens when the rest of the water used that will not be part of the closed loop system goes back into the ground? Whatever amount they confirm in the previous 2 questions, it is a lot of contaminated wastewater that is seeping below the water table or running downhill toward the wetlands. And as an aside, the slide says Springwater produces 1 to 1.3 million tons of aggregate per year. Is this accurate, given that the Lewis pit produces 3/4 of this total at 750,000 tons, and there are numerous pits in Springwater? Thank you, Sue. And then Mr. Rumble, I'll just ask, I had additional questions that you sent to me. Oh, it was Jean. Did you want me to go ahead and ask those? Okay. All right. And this is from Jean Rumble. The water issue is of great concern. While it has been stated that the pit will not dig below the water table, there does not appear to be any governing body that would oversee this. The menacing aquifer could be in grave danger from damage from release of washed water. There also does not appear to be an oversight on how much gravel is removed per year. Judging by the stakes and pit warnings have been posted behind the homes on Boothby Crescent in the last few days. This is not a 3-year timeline, but an immediate. Once the change from agricultural zoning is approved, it appears that Gallagher seems to think that this change will be fait accompli. Also of concern is the building of a cement plant and an asphalt plant at the pit. The smell and additional dust would be horrendous. Is this still on the table as it was presented in the trailer presentation? These portable plants are huge, contrary to the connotation of being portable. The value of our properties and quality of life will be jeopardized, especially with the view of a 30-foot berm. Sincerely, Jean and Rod. So, if I may, should I continue? Okay.
Absolutely, please.
All right, thank you. So then I will take the opportunity to ask the clerk to put a picture up on the screen for the folks that are tuning in possibly now or will tune in later. And I want everybody to see that this was taken April the 7th, 2023. And that was reading the report that the applicant had sent in earlier, it infers that what the residents were experiencing was related to pollen, or it was related to the farm across the way. And I can tell you no cultivating has started yet. So this clearly looks like, I don't know, drywall dust. It looks like it's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible. And I think that Esther mentioned this was the course of an 8-hour period, or less than 8 hours. So I think it's really important we demonstrate to everybody that this is what folks are dealing with. And it's a serious issue. There's 2 things I want to talk about. First is that the applicant needs to do something about this dust problem immediately. There's recommendations being made in the report from the consultant that they hired. I don't see that those recommendations have been followed through. I see that clearly we have a major problem still occurring. There was recommendations that the watering be done. The planner states that there is a watering truck on site. I don't see any data that tells me how often that watering truck is operating, how much water is being put on. I don't see the calcium amounts. So I would say that this is an immediate health concern, and I'm a nurse. So you're preaching to the choir over here, and it's carcinogenic. So I think township needs to take some responsibility too, so that we can do what we need to do as a group to make sure that this is taken care of, whatever it takes. The second piece I want to speak to, and I'm really hot. Sorry.
Warming.
Like a drowned rat over here. So the residents in my ward know that the mayor and the deputy mayor and myself and CAO Schmidt, along with General Manager Ramdeo, were present at Roma and were able to do a delegation to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. We were able to meet with Rick Breezy, parliamentary assistant, and talk to him a little bit about the need versus supply, because that's the second issue. Is we have 13 gravel pits in Ward 4. So within a 7 to 10 kilometer area, we have 13 gravel pits. So we have to take a step back and say, do we really need all of what they're proposing, or do we already have what the province says that we need? And I think there are different kinds of gravel pits and different kinds of asphalt. So I don't think we really have a clear idea of the gravel pits in our area who are in varying degrees of operation and what kind of asphalt they have. So that being said, that was part of our delegation. And then the response that we got back was that they were in the middle of completing a study. And it was a needs demand sort of supply study. And I'm just going to read to you the email that we got back. Actually, I have to thank Esther because she sent this to me and she's amazing. So this says, thank you for your interest in the finalization and release of the update to the 2016 aggregate supply and demand in the Greater Golden Horseshoe Study. Your email was forwarded to me by Jordan, copied on blah, blah, blah. As communicated by the minister at Roma, we are in the preliminary stages of an update to the study with our consultants, with an internal deadline of the end of December 23. Public release of the study results would be subject to approval, timelines, and publication design of the final report, and would likely be available in the first quarter of 2024. And that comes from the Coordinator of Resources Development Section, Resources Planning and Development, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. So all that being said, tonight, on the agenda is 4.3, where I can make a motion, and I will be putting a motion forward to ask the applicant to work really hard this summer, and not this summer, but starting immediately, addressing the dust problem. But in the motion, I'm asking the applicant to delay his application until the study results are finalized and made public. That way, council can make a really informed decision on how this should look moving forward. And I think then we would have all the information we need. Obviously, the residents would have the results of the study, and then we can make, good decisions moving forward. So that is my plan.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Council, is there any other comments or questions this time? I do have a question for Ms. Horton. On your slide that you provided, I believe it was slide 4, it showed a 30-meter setback. And to my understanding, the zone that you're applying for within the township requires 120 and 150 at the easterly where the residents are. So I'm just curious, if you're applying to the municipality for something that requires 150 meters, why are your slides showing the 30-meter setback?
Thank you for the question. I'm happy to answer the other questions that came up as well, if you like, if you have the interest or the time. But in response to the setbacks on the site are regulated under the Aggregate Resources Act. So there's an important section in that act. It's section 66, which states that where there's an overlap or where a municipal bylaw deals with the same subject matter, so that would include something like a setback, that the Aggregate Resources Act overrides. So the setback in the regulations is 30 meters, and that's why the pit's been designed. It's designed to conform with the Aggregate Resources Act setback standards, which apply for aggregate sites.
And as a follow-on to that, then wouldn't the application need to be for a different zone then? Like I'm just having difficulty understanding. I mean, you showed a slide where there was 2 stars, and one star said that we were moving to address the comments and resolve the issues during this comment period, and that was during the ARA, to which the municipality has provided comment asking you to respect the setbacks that were there. And then a subsequent slide just shows 30. And that to me, I'm just curious, if you haven't made official comment back to the municipality, you're I guess maybe is that your official comment, that you're just
We're still in the comment period. The reason the pit was designed is because it's designed to the Aggregate Resources Act standards. We haven't provided official responses to any of the comments, including the municipalities yet. So it's certainly something that we will be doing in the coming months, providing an official response to that. But that's an explanation of why you see 30 meters in the design. It's the ARA standard. But we do have the comments from the township, and we'll be providing a response in due course.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. I guess for myself, it's interesting because typically when we have applications, the applicant shows the community what they're doing and shows council what they're doing, and it conforms to our bylaws. So this is new to me, that and I'm not suggesting that there's an absolute disregard for it. It just seems odd that you're not conforming to the municipality's setbacks at all. So why, or actually maybe through you to Planner Russell, if you don't mind, how is it possible that an application can come forward for a zone that, like, isn't there usually like X and special exemptions and everything attached to it? So how is this even possible? It seems that they're applying for something that they're not showing.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to the rest of the council. you've raised a very interesting point tonight, and I think staff will need to take that back to examine it a little further. I mean, at the end of the day, the applicant has applied to implement the standard ME zone, which requires, as you've mentioned, 120 meters to any residential zone off-site and 150 meters to any residence. That has been presented as part of the application from the applicant. That has been what's posted on the signs and what is in the notice that has been circulated out to the community. So I certainly understand where you're coming from with your comment. Staff may need to seek a legal opinion with respect to the applicability of the township zoning bylaw with relation to the ARA and how that needs to be represented from an amendment perspective, and whether the townships or the applicant's application, even if the ARA, I'll use the word trumps our township bylaw, if that still needs to be legalized through the township zoning bylaw with a site-specific amendment. But I think I'm not prepared to further comment on that tonight, but if I can take that back to the township solicitor potentially. Thank you.
Thank you. And Deputy Cabral?
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. I know that I've received some correspondence, and I apologize because maybe I haven't been able, especially the last little while, to respond accordingly, because I knew this meeting was coming up, and many of these faces here, I think I might have met over the course of the last year. But when it came to the dust, I know that was an issue because I have seen similar pictures of the dust, and I'm going back to some time now prior to this year. However, my question would be, and I don't know whether or not this is something that can be answered by the consultant, Mayor Coughlin, or whether it's something that should maybe be addressed to someone who was earlier on kind enough to make a presentation. But in respect of the dust, it's been going on for some time. I want to know if there's been any mitigation whatsoever provided to the residents that would alleviate it. And I'd also like to know whether or not there are any, I guess, complaints of dust that have been brought to your attention in the past, to the Gallagher in the past, and what has been done at that time. Because what I'm hearing now is what we're going to do going forward. Yet I'm also hearing from the folks that have come here to speak on this subject tonight that this is not a new issue. It's not a new problem. It's something that's been going on for a long time and hasn't been addressed. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what's coming down the pipes that's so new that's going to immediately clear up this issue. So I'm looking for some kind of a response to that if possible.
If I could suggest, Mr. Kennedy's on the line, and he's, I'm involved in the expansion applications as a planning consultant, but Mr. Kennedy's involved in the day-to-day operations of the pit. And I think if he can unmute, he'd be best equipped to explain how complaints have been managed, what complaints have been received, and what operationally they're doing on the site. So I'll just, if he's able to unmute, I think he can better answer that question.
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
I got you.
And then start my video.
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Start my video. Click.
Am I on there?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Coughlin and council and staff and members of the public. We've heard your concerns. The dust issues that were brought to my attention in November of last year was the first time I'd heard about it. The M&R had been obviously called. Esther had been in touch with the M&R about it. She had made calls, I guess, or emails to our operator of the pit. Those never got forwarded to me, and I apologize for that. But since November, we've been looking at, what needs to be done, and whether the pit is the culprit or whether there's other areas to be looked at that create dust.
But we have a consultant, we immediately hired a consultant to look into this, and he's done an investigation, could not come to a total conclusion. We're going to be putting in place monitors here in the next couple of weeks that'll run all season to see where the dust, if there's dust leaving the site and how far it's going, and whether that is the problem that the residents are experiencing. At this point, we can't deny or confirm one way or the other, and we're working on it. So we do have a watering truck that actually started tonight to water the internal roads. The only complaint I've ever had in the last few years was from the M&R about dust onto George Johnson Road, and we immediately get on top of that. And then there was calcium put down on part of the internal roads to combat dust from truck traffic. So watering will be and has been, but will continue to be done even more so. We meter the amount of water we take out of the well that supplies that water truck. All I can say is that we're looking, it's a tough balance in the aggregate industry. The aggregates are needed for everybody. Every house around us had to have aggregates for all the development that's going on needs aggregates. So it's a real tough balance with the aggregate world to try to supply an essential service, but also keep everybody happy. It's not easy. I've been at this 52 years and still haven't found the secret. You can't shut the aggregate. You can't shut the aggregate industry down, or you wouldn't be growing. So anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Deputy Cabral does have a follow-on.
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. I guess going back to your presentation, Ms. Horton, with respect to the current operations being relatively distanced from the residents, and then having this dust and noise issue existing now, regardless of whether going forward it's approved or not, and whether or not the operations themselves take place at this additional site that you're proposing be rezoned, those existing issues and problems that you said the processing would still take place on the original site are still going to be existing and need to be mitigated. So I just wanted to clarify that enlarging it and simply taking the aggregate to the spot where it's already causing a problem, I don't think is a mitigation in and of itself. And I do appreciate Mr. Kennedy. I do appreciate Mr. Kennedy's comments and response, and it is a bit of a balance, that's for certain. And certainly when lives are impacted, it becomes even more so. So just wanted to make that last comment.
And I appreciate that. It's an excellent comment. And I think it's very important to remember what I mentioned in the presentation, that we are in the early stages. There's a lot of work that's been done on the technical studies. And at the end of the day, both the ministry officials and the municipality have to be satisfied that the mitigation is appropriate to control, things like dust and noise. There are provincial standards that need to be met, and that's what every gravel pit in Ontario is responsible to comply to. So that's the test. It's a technical test, though, and so the engineering reports will ultimately be what needs to be carefully assessed, and we're just in the stages of doing that now. Both the municipality and the province. So I think that's, I certainly appreciate the comment. Obviously, we're very interested in the concerns that we've heard tonight. I did want to clarify one thing while I have an opportunity. There was a comment about the dust being carcinogenic. I don't want people to get confused with respirable crystalline silica, RSC. So that is, silica is a compound that's found mostly in Northern Ontario. It's not typically found in Southern Ontario, and tests of this material in the entire township are not high in silica. So in terms of being a cancer-causing health hazard, That's a little bit of a misleading notion for this site, and we're certainly happy to provide the scientific evidence to support that. But again, Ministry of Environment is obviously closely looking at this, and they must be satisfied that there's no health hazard here. I just wanted to make that comment.
And thank you. Before I go to Councillor Fisher, Councillor Moore just had a comment.
Through the Mayor Coughlin, I just want to say too that as we sit and contemplate the motion that's coming forward, I think that we should also be contemplating hiring our own tester. Somebody that we can hire and ask the residents to collect samples and have the testing done ourselves. I think that would be somebody that we can trust.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Fisher?
Actually, what I was about to say ties into what Councillor Moore just said. As for Mr. Kennedy's consultant, I personally find it very hard to believe that a consultant hired could not quickly ascertain whether the dust on people's cars, on their roofs, in their backyards, did not come from the pit and could potentially come from an agricultural or pollen. I find that very hard to believe that a consultant worth their salt could not quickly find out where that dust came from. Just a statement.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor, are there any other comments or questions this evening? And seeing none. Thank you who all participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the official plan amendment and for showing an interest in the matter. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the public meeting? Councillor Garwood and Deputy Cabral, that this public meeting held under sections 17 and 34 of the Planning Act for applications ZB 2023-001 Johnson, ZB 2023-003, and OP 2023-002 Everstock Development, and ZB 2022-016 and OP 2022-002 the Gallagher Materials Incorporated Lewis Pit is now adjourned at 8:06 p.m. All those in favor? And that is carried. We're now moving on to, no. Only if you keep talking, Phil. May I have a mover and seconder to refer OP 2022 and ZB 2022. Oh, it's all three. Each one individually. Council, may I have a mover and seconder? May I have a mover and seconder to refer ZB 2023-001 Johnston 154 Scarlet Line back to staff? Councillors Moore and Thompson, that council having held a public meeting in accordance with section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, and P13 as amended on a zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2023-001 by K and S Johnson, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Are there any further questions? And seeing none, all those in favor? And that has carried. Moving on to 4.2, may I have a mover and a seconder to refer OP 2023-02 and ZB 2023-003, the Everstock Development at 25 Yonge Street North, back to staff. Deputy Cabral and Councillor Garwood, that council having held a public meeting in accordance with sections 17, 21, and 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13 as amended on official plan amendment applications OP 2023-002 and zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2023-003 by Everstock Developments, having noted correspondence received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And may I have a mover and seconder for 4.3 to refer OP-002-02 and ZB 2022-016 Gallagher Materials 2857 George Johnson Road back to staff. And I would need a mover and seconder first. Counselors Garwood and Alexander, that council, having held a public meeting in accordance with section 1723 and 1721 and 34 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended on official plan amendment application for OP 2022-002 and zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2022-016 by Gallagher Materials, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Council, are there any amendments, comments, or questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So we will add then, and that council hereby requests that the applicant delay its pursuit of an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for the expansion of the Lewis Pit until such time that the province releases update to the aggregate supply and demand report slated for release in the first quarter of 2024. Secondly, I'd like to add to that now that council approve an independent tester. What do we call them? What do you call it? Tester or independent contractor to test the dust that the residents will collect for us. Want to add to that, George?
You're not gonna like what I'm gonna say.
No, okay.
No.
Yeah.
Councillor Moore, if, with your indulgence, can I turn to staff to find out if there is anything in-house or if there's anything similar that maybe in your experience? CO Schmidt?
Anybody can throw sand around and say, oh, look at that, come and get.
Oh, and we're gonna just mute. Thank you very much. And CO Schmidt?
And thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to members of council. It's something that staff would definitely have to take a look back or look into. That's not something that we typically would be involved in at this stage. And I would also indicate that depending on the direction by council, if you're looking for us to sole source someone, we would also need that direction because typically our procurement bylaw will require us to obtain additional quotes. So again, I just throw that out for council's consideration.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. It's not that I significantly oppose it. It's just that it's a question that can't necessarily be answered at this point in time. We have no idea. First off, I'm not sure what we're going to be testing for, but I have a sneaking suspicion is to test the sand for carcinogenic, I guess. What I might suggest, however, is that staff explore the opportunity or option to reach out to our engineering consultant. They may have someone in mind. And the other aspect of this is we don't know what the cost would be. And I think it's, sorry, folks, you're taxpayers, but I have to also recognize we've got, a lot of other taxpayers in the township, and we have to be mindful of how we spend those money. So to just simply go ahead and say, let's do it and not have any idea what the cost might be would be unfair to the other taxpayers. So it's not that I'm totally against it. It's just that I'm questioning it. It's certainly something that you folks might be able to undertake on your own in consultation with staff, but I would certainly support having staff reach out to our consulting and engineering firm to see whether or not that's something that could be done at a relatively nominal fee or cost.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. What we need to test is the composition of the dust. So there has been some assumptions on, it could be pollen, it could be from the farm fields. I think we need to test it for composition as well as certainly if it is it hazardous to your health. And secondly, I don't think it should be on the residents to pay for this. I think they have to live with it. It's not their fault. And it is a township problem. It can't be just a one little street problem. This is a problem. It's on George Johnston Road. It's on Seaton Road. If it's bigger, it goes all the way up to the Highlands, to Carson Estates. So I think it's our responsibility just to pay for this and make sure it's safe.
And I'm going to go to Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coggan. I would agree with Councillor Moore on this. I think if we are looking at potentially changing zoning laws, bylaws, and affecting where you live, your livelihood, all of that, I think we need to be very aware of what is there. I think when we're looking at a company that's looking at expanding in the area, we need to know what we as council and we as a township are okay with having come into our community. There are a number of aggregate and gravel pits within this community that I think are very good neighbors and good businesses. So I don't think it has to be like this. And I personally don't feel like I can simply trust what Gallagher is going to come back and tell us.
And I'm going to move. Wow, it's easier when it's clapping and not boos, so I do appreciate it, but that's fine. And I'm wondering then if, sorry, before I go back to Deputy Cabral, I'm wondering then if there's an opportunity, I guess in the seat that I'm in, I want to be mindful of our procurement bylaws. And I'm wondering if this would be a separate motion at maybe our regular meeting of council, or it can be separated so that it does provide staff with the opportunity to come back to council to tell us the best path forward. Because again, in what Deputy Cabral has said, well, I would love to just say, yeah, absolutely, we'll go do it. But if it comes back and it's got a price tag that we have to then be responsible to our residents, I think that having more information is better. So it's not that I don't, I just am curious if you'd be willing to separate the two. And Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm happy to leave the motion on the table and have staff reach out and find out and come back to us with a report at a regular meeting. I mean, we can still do that here. At least that way we'll know the ins and outs and have an opportunity to discuss, and we'll be able to find out the information from some folks that we deal with on a regular basis.
And I do see that Clerk Ainsworth has potential wording here. Clerk Ainsworth, if you could.
Thank you. In addition to what Councillor Moore read, I would add and further that staff be requested to seek costs for an independent contractor to test the composition of the dust on neighboring properties.
That is palatable. And then before we end that, can I just turn to Planner Russell? Because I am concerned that in public notice and in the public that went out, it actually says that in that bylaw, it's 150 meters. So this public meeting that we're holding tonight gave everybody in Springwater an idea that there was going to be a buffer of 150 and 120. And then we get a report that comes forward and it's 30. And that to me is not open and transparent. So how do we find out to me, if they were going to do 30, it should have been 30 on all the signs and they were going to be applying for something entirely different. So I'm just curious if when you spoke earlier today, you said that you could potentially be seeking a legal opinion. Is that something that council needs to direct you to do, or is that something that can be done? Because typically when there is legal involved, it does require direction of council.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I believe, yeah, I mean, if you'd like to direct staff to reach out to for a legal opinion with respect to the applicability of the ARA and the township zoning bylaw, I think that's well advised.
Okay, and it can either be a friendly amendment to Councillor Moore's, or I can put forward a second amendment after. Okay. So council, we do have an amendment put forward by Councillor Moore and seconded by Deputy Cabral. That council hereby request the applicant delay the pursuit of an official plan zoning bylaw amendment for the expansion of the Lewis pit until such time that the province release its update on the aggregate study and demand report slated for release in the first quarter of 2024. And further, that staff be requested to seek costs for an independent contractor to test the composition of the dust in the neighboring properties. And further, that staff be directed to seek legal opinion regarding the proposed extraction setbacks in relation to the requirements outlined in the Aggregates Act. Council, we are voting on the amendment. All those in favor? And that has carried. And now we will go back to the main motion as amended. So it's 4.3, and that council, having held a public meeting in accordance with section 17 and 21 of 34 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 P13 as amended on official plan amendment applications OP 2022 and zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2022 and 016 by Gallagher Materials, having noted correspondence and input received to direct that the application be referred back to staff. And that council hereby requests the applicant delay the pursuit of an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for the expansion of the Lewis Pit until such time that the province releases its update to the aggregate supply and demand report slated for release in the first quarter of 2024. Further, that staff be requested to seek costs for an independent contractor to test the composition of the dust in the neighboring properties. And further, that staff be directed to seek legal opinion regarding the proposed extraction setbacks in relation to the requirements outlined in the Aggregate Act. Council, all those in favor? And that motion has carried. Thank you. We're now moving on to 5, our confirmation bylaw. May I have a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Councillors Garwood and Moore, that the bylaw 2023-39 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council be at the special meeting held on April 12th, 2023, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? And that has carried. And may I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the meeting, please? Councillors Thompson and Fisher, that the special meeting of the township does now adjourn at 8:21 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on April 19th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you very much.